Hello, welcome to High Point Music. My name is Lewis and this is my video on the art of parallel routing. Parallel routing is a form of mixing effects together and it's an incredibly powerful tool for creating some really interesting and expressive guitar tones. So my goals of the video are to explain a little bit about what parallel routing is and how it relates to what you can use in the HX Stomp, as well as show you some sound examples of why parallel routing works. And then I'll do a little video or a little section of the video at the end, just adding some different parallel routing blocks in so that you can see the different options you have available using a Line 6 HX Stomp. Now, of course, you could do this with another pedal. You could do this with, say, a Boss LS2, for example. Some of the Lely products also offer some blending. The problem is, of course, you need quite a few patch cables. You need the other pedals, and the amount of physical space it would take to plug everything in is 10 times what this pedal is. Not to mention you actually have to know where all the cables are going. It's a little bit more in depth. If you've never explored mixing of effects or parallel routing before, a Line 6 HX series product is a fantastic way to explore it without having to solder a bunch of patch cables or buy a bunch of pedals that you may not necessarily have just to see what they sound like. So a great format for being able to do parallel routing. So let's jump into it. The first step that we need to do is, of course, subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure if you want to get notifications when we put the videos out, you can hit the little bell. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, helping us to put out as much good quality content as we can, you can do so by following those links below. Step number 2 is, of course, grab your favorite guitar. Today I am playing my Vantage VA900. These are a Japanese made guitar. Very pretty, very cool. I've used it in the last couple of videos. It is running straight into the mono input of the HX Stomp, coming out of the mono output and then running off to our Ableton session. I do have an expression pedal plugged in here, which is this blue cable. I'm going to use that in one of the examples a little later on. If you're interested in building a guitar rig in a HX Stomp to be able to try some of this blending or adding an expression pedal to your already built preset rig, there are videos we recently released on our channel that go through how to do that, and you will find access to them in the links below. So, first example is a mono rig. This is just a basic guitar rig. You can see I've got a overdrive, a delay, a reverb, and my amplifier model. And the purpose of this is to show you something that is a complicated guitar sound, so that I can give you an example of what parallel routing of this particular effect set would sound like. So here we go. So you can hear that in that example, it gets a little bit washy. If I give it a little strike, you can hear that our reverb is triggered off the delay repeats. And if you're playing a part that is meant to be spacious and occupy a bit of room, but not necessarily destroy what the rhythm section are doing, those reverbed repeats stick out like something. They stick out really obviously. And that might not be the sound you're going for. Conversely, if you were to look at reversing those effects, and I've got the same effect set here, but with the delay before the reverb, this is what it would sound like. So what you can hear there is, even with those effects in the other order, our guitar hits the reverb washes out, hits the delay, and then the delay repeats the reverbed guitar tone. Again, this is a really cool way of creating some ambient sound, but if you're playing anything more than a few notes or a few chords a bar, it gets very busy very quickly, and I struggle with that because as a guitarist, I feel it's my job to fill the space appropriately. It's something I find difficult because I love overplaying, apparently, but as a guitarist, ideally I need to shut up when it's somebody else's spotlight. If it's somebody else's solo or there's somebody singing, I want to get out of the way of them. I don't want to be playing what I consider to be boring guitar tones, but I want to make sure that what I'm playing fits the song. So a way I would do that with such a complicated or such an effect-heavy guitar signal is I would use parallel routing. If I scroll across here to 116 here and show you, this is the same guitar rig. We've got the same digital delay, I've got the same glitz reverb, but this time the delayed repeats don't go through the reverb and the reverb does not go through the delay. So it's separating and cleaning up the guitar tone. Just the strike example, if I do this, compared to this, you get the attack of my guitar tone hitting that reverb and then just the delay repeats passing through. If I go back to the serial path, because my delay repeats are running through the reverb, they get reverb on them. So that is probably the best example I could show as to why those sounds would sound so good and why you might do them. It's a really cool way to clean your guitar tone up and still allow you to use lots of effects, but use them in a way that is creative, a way that creates a feel, it creates emotion in the song because you're adding layers, like not unlike a painter, drawing a painting or painting a painting, drawing a picture or some sort of artwork where you want layers, you want depth, you want to be able to explore the bigger picture rather than just be a noisy guitar person. So that's a pretty good example of parallel routing. To show you some other examples of parallel routing, I do have a couple more presets here. The next one I'm going to show you is we go over to, where are we? Over here. So this parallel routed path, what I'm using is as opposed to just the A-B split, which is just an equal amount of signal to A and an equal amount of signal to B, I'm using a crossover split. Now what that means is that any frequency below 500 Hertz is sent to the B path, which is a pitch shifter and an arbitrator fuzz. And any signal above 500 Hertz is going to pass through to my valve driver, my low and high cut filter, a reverb, and my guitar amp. Now everything is being blended back in here. I'm going to just set my B level back to 0 so that each of the signals comes through evenly mixed. You can do some panning, you can do some polarity changes, and some overall level control here. You would do those obviously for more complicated mix settings, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to do a straight one-to-one mix. Quickly save that so it doesn't move away when I change presets to show you the other example. Now, I should shut up and show you what this sounds like. So everything below 500 Hertz is fuzzy and octave, and everything above is clean, just with that little bit of EQ to clean it up. So you get this cool taste or dueling guitar tone there that has a very different feel to it because of the different effects, and it could almost sound as though it was another guitar playing the part. So by doing some clever parallel routing in your guitar rig for even just one part of one song, you will give the illusion of some live overdubs without having to have a pre-recorded track, without having to have another guitarist on stage. You can pick and choose these moments to create more interesting guitar sounds that'll help your guitar tone to create the mood and emotion that you and the members of your band might be going for. Another good example of where you might use parallel routing is to do some blending of effects that do not have a blending function otherwise. You'll see in the HX Effects videos and in some of the HX Stomp videos, I have talked about the mix function of a particular effect block being a really powerful way of controlling the density. You might have a really long repeats and really long decay time for this huge washy delay, but the mix control allows you to just blend it in right at the bottom of everything, so it's not overpowering, but you're still getting a little something in the background, a little bit of bang for your buck. Now, that's a very simple way of having these guitar sounds divided and definition given to them, but a really good way of giving definition, particularly to more heavy accented riffs, is to blend a bit of clean tone in with some very heavy distortion. It gives us our boldness back, it gives our attack and our syncopation back to the riff we're playing, but allows that wall of fuzz or wall of distortion to really come through and sound chaotic and get that emotional response going. This particular setting I've got dialed up here is just using the A-B split, so it's an even split. I've got a triangle fuzz, which is based on a big muff here, running all the way through to a standardly mixed mixer function, so clean and dirty coming through at the same level, just into our Mesa Boogie model and a little bit of plate reverb. This is what it sounds like. Now, just to give you an idea, if we go back up here to my mixer split and start to pull a bit of clean tone out, Fuzz and overdrive is also a pretty, fuzz and overdrive with clean is also a pretty powerful way of showing that definition of tone. So that's a good way that I would approach that. The other thing you could do to accent this particular sound would be to use the low and high cut filters. Now, in this example, I've got my high cut on the fuzz, so it'll cut everything that passes above 8 kilohertz, and it'll allow everything below to pass through. Then I go up here to my other filter and I'm cutting everything below 1 kilohertz here and everything above 8 kilohertz. So I'm getting everything between 1 and 8, and here I'm getting everything between nothing and 8. Now what that does is it breaks up my signal and allows me to use a particular amount of sound on the valve overdrive and a particular amount on the fuzz. This is still the A-B split, so otherwise the frequencies are even, but this is what it sounds like using the high pass filter as well. So you get a really overdriven sound, a really saturated, distorted guitar sound, but it's still got really good definition and the bottom end frequencies are under control. The top end frequencies have just that little bit enough on them to help them to crunch up a bit with a bit of lead work. And the bottom end frequencies have that gnarly bite to them from the Big Muff Fuzz. So another cool way to get a blend of tones that is maybe not as obvious, but allows you to create a distortion sound that you couldn't get from just one pedal. So another really cool way of approaching that sound. So another way you can use parallel routing to create some cool sounds with your guitar rig is if you like a bit of down tuning, you like a bit of drop D, you like a bit of octave pedal, maybe you listen to a band called Royal Blood and you want to get that amazing dueling guitar and bass tone. Normally you would just throw an octave pedal on and all of your guitar signal gets affected by it. And you'd end up needing something pretty serious as an octaver to really get some high-level tones. Those of you that have seen the video we've made on the Electro Harmonix POG will have an idea of how expensive but how cool some of those sounds are. Now, I am a pretty big Adam Jones fan, the guitarist from Tool. He does this cool split rig thing where he runs a certain amount of frequency from his guitar through a bass amp and then most of the other frequency through his guitar amps. And it's a way of giving definition to each of the areas of sound so that it has some bassy speakers and a bass amp to push those bass frequencies, and it doesn't take away from the power of the top end and vice versa. The treble frequencies moving the speakers and running through the amplifier aren't affecting the bass tone and the response of the bass amp. So another cool way of breaking up your guitar tone and getting some good definition. This particular example here I've got is just a basic split crossover, so anything below 800 Hertz, running into a simple pitch shifter. Simple pitch shifter goes off to this Del Sol bass amp, and then the guitar amp is just a placated dirty guitar amp. They are being mixed back together here at even levels, just for the purposes of this video. I think it's a bit easier to hear those sounds, and then running straight out. This is what it sounds like. So you can hear that their bottom end frequencies really do get caught by that filter and allow that bottom end to kind of be a bit rougher, a bit deeper, without necessarily getting in the way of the distance between your notes and the space between the notes that you're playing on the top end. So another really cool way of breaking that sound up and getting a very cool set of effects that would be very hard to do with standard gear outside of something like the HX Stomp. Another example of this blending of amps I think is really cool is the blend. Now, I grew up a bit of a gear nerd, believe it or not, and I always dreamt of having the split guitar rig. One of the biggest influences on me, other than Adam Jones, who I've just spoken about, was Slash from Guns N' Roses. And I remember seeing a guitar interview with him where he talked about having one set of amps that control his dirty channel and one set of amps for his clean channel, and using a switching system to be able to jump between the two. Now that means you can get some very specific guitar sounds out of amplifiers that maybe don't have multiple channels, or that are really good at doing one thing, and you maybe don't like the clean tone or you don't like the dirty tone, you want to switch that out. I always dreamt, of course, you know, Marshall clean tones and Fender dirty tones, or vice versa. I believe that at the time I was heavily influenced also by John Frusciante, who uses Marshall cleans and Fender dirty sounds. Wes Borland is another great example, the Limp Bizkit guitarist. He had those massive triple Rex for his down-tuned guitar tones, but his clean tone was a pair of JC120 Rolands. Very clean, beautiful amplifiers. So the ability to be able to mix between different styles of amplifier is super cool. So here I have an example of how to do that. What I've got is an A-B split, and I want my split to be even. we're going to have, I'm not going to use the overdrive pedal, but I've got one there just in case. I've got a clean tone, and then I've got a dirty tone and a volume pedal. Now the volume pedal is in position so that I can turn the volume down of the dirty channel and blend it into my clean. Fans of the band Violent Soho would be kind of familiar with this guitar tone. That's what they do. They run their clean amps most of the time, and then when it comes time to punch the dirty on, they're typically blending a distortion amp into those sounds. Anyway, this is what it sounds like just with the clean tone dialed up. So you can hear that it allows you a seamless transition from your clean tone into your dirty, and allows you to get some emotional response and create a bit of mood and atmosphere by picking positions that have a little bit dirty and a little bit more dirty, as opposed to just going clean, dirty, or having multiple overdrive pedals set for different stages. This is a great way to be able to achieve those tones, but using some very specific features of the HX Stomp. So there are a few examples of how you could use parallel routing to increase the tonal options of your guitar sound. Ways you can make it more interesting, you can make it more complicated, you can really work within the scope of your sound to find a sweet spot that is relevant for the piece of music you're playing and for the style, and to make sure that you sound as good as you can possibly sound. I think that's very cool. Obviously. So what I'd like to show you now is just a very brief rundown on how you actually control the Line 6 HX Stomp to create these parallel paths. So we'll jump over to our overhead camera. You can see here I've got this Order 66 patch dialed up. I'll give you a quick strum so you can hear what it sounds like. So you'll hear that it's pretty spacious. Now the reason it is pretty spacious is because I've got 3 reverbs. That's a little bit silly, but anyway. A nice modulated chorus echo, and then just my dirty channel. So the way you would create these parallel sounds, you select the block that you want to move, you press your action button, and then you've got the very first button here is an A path, or path function you can choose between A and B on. Now, that is fairly straightforward. So you get that little bit of movement there, and although moving it like this doesn't change its position relevant to the A path, it does allow you to mix a few more effects in. So let's say you want to do your delay in one channel. So we're going to accept that. Then I'm going to scroll over here and just find a very basic reverb, which is the plate reverb. And I'm also going to move that to the B path, like so. Now the difference is that now sounds like this. And you'll hear that you get that definition back very, very quickly. Now if you wanted to, you could also move these other effects to the B path, like so. Again, action button, down to the path control, like so. And now we get our guitar tone going all the way through, and our reverbs and delays mixed in separately. And just to give you an idea what that sounds like otherwise, we simply move that path back to A, this path back to A, this back to A. So that's my introduction to parallel routing, how you can do it with the line 6 Stomp, the advantages of why you would do it, some examples of different instrumentation or different applications using different types of parallel routing, being it stereo splitting, A/B, using the crossover, or again, as I mentioned, I'll do a compression video specifically where I'll show the compression split. But that should give you a pretty good idea of what's available and what you can do for yourselves. Thank you very much for watching this video. It has been a little bit head heavy on the diving through menus, but I promise you the tonal results will be worth the while spending the time with it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.